What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Maple Leafs Media. As always, I'm Jake Varco. I'm joined by a special guest today, a fellow classmate, Jori. You want to introduce yourself to the viewers here at Maple Leafs Media?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Jori, fellow classmate of Jake's. As already mentioned, you can catch me on Twitter at JoriNS_, and very excited to be alongside Jake for this one.
Yeah, and you know what? Give his Twitter a follow. He's got a lot of great content out there covering a variety of sports, not just hockey. You got some Olympic tweets, Paralympic tweets, really NFL, football, everything's on there. So make sure you check that out.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you joining me for today's show. We're going to have some great discussions about tonight's matchup between the Seattle Kraken and the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's the first time that the Seattle Kraken will play at Scotiabank Arena, so some buzz in the air in the Toronto area. The Seattle Kraken on the road this season are 7-19-2. So the Maple Leafs looking to take advantage of that after not the best victory last night.
Yeah, last night not really an ideal finish. Looked really strong in the first period. I mean, Austin Matthews is a different animal. He puts in his 40th goal last night. But I mean, the second period kind of, teetering a little bit, bending, not breaking. And then the third period rolls around and I mean, things kind of go haywire. And thankfully, there was that great shot, of course, Michael Bunting scores, and the shot of him with Matthews bickering on the bench. But I mean, thank goodness for that first line. That line is something else. But I mean, even to another game where they're giving up, 4 goals is not ideal. So they're going to have to get that solved.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. The top line has been fantastic, arguably one of the best, if not the best line in the National Hockey League right now. But the way that this team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they tend to fall apart at times. Like those 3 goals that you were just talking about, those were all allowed in a span of just 20 minutes and 43 seconds. That is a major red flag. That's a major concern for Leafs Nation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the problem is also that it's been both goalies. It's not just, Jack Campbell, hits a rough patch and then Peter Mrazek comes in, but the problem is that Mrazek also has his own struggles. So somebody's got to kind of find their game. You'd hope it'd be one or the other sooner than later. I mean, it's been tough sledding right now, and they need a save. I mean, thankfully the goal scoring is so prolific. They're amongst the league leaders in goals scored on the season. But I mean, it's tough to win just generally if you can't get a save. So I think that's going to be something really to watch is especially because the Kraken themselves, they're not exactly an offensive juggernaut. So you'd hope that this one is kind of an opportunity for the Maple Leafs, kind of find their stride in the defensive end.
Definitely. You'd hope that the Toronto Maple Leafs take advantage of the fact that the Seattle Kraken are a bottom feeder team in the NHL. They're not a team that really scores a ton of goals. And you were just talking about how the goaltending has been in a massive slump. It's been really lackluster at best as of late. I'm going to share a tweet that you sent out the other day regarding this. So if you want to cover this and let everyone know.
Yeah, for sure. And this was during the third period. So Vancouver would ultimately add another. So that was 6 against Vancouver. And you can see, and then of course, just last night they give up the 4 to Columbus. It's tough to win games when you're giving up that many goals. And it's really kind of been the theme of the Leaf season, especially, shocking given that, Jack Campbell looked like a Vezina candidate for about 3 months of the season. And then, the COVID shutdown happens, and that obviously probably takes him out of his rhythm, and they're not able to recover. It's just difficult to win games when you're giving up 4-5 goals a game. You need, obviously you need defensive structure. And I don't necessarily think that the Leafs are lacking in that, because they have their moments. There's the odd Justin Hall blunder, or the odd, Morgan Riley will make a pinch and it'll end up going back the other way. But the defense by and large has not been as glaring an issue. They're constantly out shooting their opponents. They're out possessing them. They're out chancing them. It's really just kind of been a case of sometimes, sometimes you just can't get a save, and sometimes it costs your team.
And you know what? I don't think that the defense has been great. I don't think it's been as horrible as, everyone's made it the center of attention here in Toronto and surrounding area. It's been the center of attention. The defense is the focal point. They're the reason that all the struggles are happening. And I don't think that's necessarily true. They have a significant part in it at times, but the goaltending as of late has been a real issue. Jack Campbell in his last 4 starts has allowed 19 goals. Peter Mrazek hasn't been much better. Right now, the Maple Leafs have two goaltenders who are playing at a 1B level, and they really need to step up their game, because you mentioned that Jack Campbell was a Vezina candidate early in the season. He was an all-star. That's great, but we need to see him regain some of that confidence, get some of that back, because I cannot remember the last time a team with a lackluster goaltender won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, no, it's damn near impossible to go anywhere. And I mean, ultimately, the regular season is still important, but at this point, the Leafs are really in a lot of ways playing for the playoffs, right? We've seen that they can do it in the regular season. That's really not a question. It's once, April, May, and June roll around. I mean, ideally June. That's when you need to be your best, and part of being your best is getting those saves. I mean, Jack Campbell, as I mentioned, he was amongst the league leaders in goals saved above expected to begin the season. I obviously don't have the stat with me at the moment, but I mean, he's dipped below the kind of the watermark of just even. He's dipped below evens. So I mean, to be giving up more goals than expected is not something that you're gonna find success with. You've got to be able to get the save when you need it, and sometimes it's not always the easiest thing. Sometimes there's going to be goals that are going to be even on deflections or screens. But I mean, again, sometimes it's just you got to make a save, and that's really, I think, going to be so key for the Maple Leafs. As we approach the trade deadline and they start to discuss what their options are as the deadline approaches.
Well, to me, it's not really a playoff caliber style of hockey when you're allowing 3 or more goals in 8 of your last 9 games. That is just, it's not going to get you very far in the playoffs. It might get you some wins in the regular season. That's great, but we all know that the playoffs are another animal. The competition in there is a lot better, and it's going to be tougher. So the Maple Leafs really need to figure out what they're going to do, if they're going to end up trading for someone to bring in, which I don't know if that is the answer or not. Uh, what do you think? Where would you like to see the Maple Leafs at the trade deadline?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of offense, 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 which is ironic because the Leafs already have offense in spades. But you know, the Leafs have their strengths and they have their weaknesses, and ideally, the goaltending. The old saying is that goaltending is voodoo, right? So it's hard to go out there and try to acquire a goalie when you don't even know if the goalie that you're going to bring in is going to be successful. So I don't love the idea of spending assets, especially if they're significant assets. If you're sending a Nick Robertson or a Rodion Amirov or a Topi Niemela, maybe not Rodion Amirov at this point, but you're sending a significant asset. It's difficult, right? It's a hefty price to pay. The defense, there's some options. I mean, Mark Giordano's playing in this game. He's been linked to the Leafs a couple of times, and I mean, you like what he brings maybe, but it's tough to see where he fits. He's a left-handed shot. It's not clear if they have an opening there. I mean, if you've got your strengths, you may as well lean into them. I mean, if you're going to score 5 goals a game, why not try to score 6 goals a game? Is my kind of thought process, and I think that in a lot of ways, I would imagine the Leafs management thinks in a similar way. I mean, I was listening uh, earlier today to Justin Bourne on Fan 590, and he was talking about how that's really kind of how Dubas and Keefe tend to normally think. And to me, that's the right attitude, because if you've got your strengths, lean into them and use those to your advantage. And obviously, playoff hockey is a different animal, but that's clearly how the Leafs are going to win games.
And you know what? You, myself, anyone watching this, we don't really have the answer of what the Maple Leafs are going to do at the trade deadline. It's all just speculation talk, and we are going to analyze the trades when they do happen. But it's fun to talk about. And if you're Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe, a member of this front office, what you want to do at the trade deadline is find a way to make your team better, whether that's at goaltender, defense, or at forward.
Yeah,
Whatever you feel makes the biggest impact on your team. And I heard last night the name Marc Andre Fleury was brought up in this chat. And listen, I'm a massive Marc Andre Fleury fan growing up. He was one of my favorite players, but he's an aging goaltender, and I feel as if bringing a new goaltender into a team has a bigger change than adding a position player, in the sense it's harder for that goaltender to gain chemistry with everyone else around him.
yeah, and the goaltending thing again, it's just such a crapshoot, really, with any goalie, right? I mean, Philip Grubauer was an above average goalie last year, and now he's fallen apart. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky was terrible for the last 2 years, and then this season has come on like a house on fire. So to bet on a goalie, especially at a time like the trade deadline, when you've got such a small sample, a small kind of window when you can be successful, it just to me screams kind of desperation when there's much more material ways that you can improve this team. But I think also, all the talk of the trades, I mean, part of it too is that this team, as it stands right now, needs to prove that they're, good enough to warrant adding a significant piece, right? And that's really, I think, what the last few games have really kind of even brought into question to a degree. And hopefully tonight they're able to kind of silence that kind of discussion, I think.
Well, I think that although if you're looking at the teams that they play over this next week, they're not great teams, but this is an opportunity for the Maple Leafs to silence those conversations that you're just talking about. The Maple Leafs can ill afford to overlook their opponents. I know they've got a big game coming Sunday, and I'm sure everyone's excited about the outdoor venue game. I'll be at that game at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, Buffalo, Toronto. I was also at the last game that the Sabres played against the Maple Leafs, and let me tell you, that was an ugly game, 5-1 Buffalo. Tonight, they play against the Seattle Kraken, and then Thursday against the Arizona Coyotes. They cannot drop these two games. If they drop these two games, like, I know it's a long 82 game season, but that would be a real concern in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously you don't want to read too much into a 2 game sample. Now, obviously, lately it's been a much greater than a 2 game sample. But I mean, you can't be losing to teams like, the Buffalo Sabres and the Seattle Kraken and the Arizona Coyotes on a regular basis, and expect to really be a noisemaker when the playoffs roll around. And I think that's something that I'm sure the Leafs themselves are kind of aware of. But in terms of putting a lot of weight into these games, I think the game that I will say I actually would put some weight into would be the Heritage Classic, just because of the stakes and the kind of the excitement that surrounds the game. It's a big game, and you want to be able to kind of see the Leafs perform on the big stages, right? And it's obviously only a single regular season game, but it's still a much larger stage than a regular old Sunday afternoon whatever game, right? So I definitely think that's something I wouldn't read too much into, but also maybe don't write them off entirely.
Yeah, and another point about that game Sunday, like, you know that the Buffalo Sabres are going to come ready to play that game. Like, that is, both teams should be prepared for that game because it's going to be a big one. But tonight, we're discussing tonight's game. We'll get back to that. Uh, Last time these two teams, the Seattle Kraken and Toronto Maple Leafs, met up, it was in Seattle. The Maple Leafs won by a score of 6-2. Was not a close game, but uh, again, we'll see if the Maple Leafs can replicate that effort here tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's, in an ideal world, how things go. I mean, it's kind of, although that game's a bit of an outlier, it's part of that same stretch they've had where it's been a lot of, high flying 80s type hockey, right? And they're gonna have to kind of clean that up. And that game, back on Valentine's Day, I think that's an example of the way the Leafs want to play. Listen, you're not going to allow 1 or 2 goals every game. You're not going to shut out the other team every game, but to really kind of assert your talent and your dominance over a team like the Kraken is something that the Maple Leafs are going to want to do, or they're going to have to do. Uh, just purely based on the fact that they're supposed to be a cup contender, right? I mean, if you're not beating these teams, I mean, you're kind of wasting your time almost.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's really tricky. Like we can take both sides here, and I'm agreeing with you. Like this is a game that the Maple Leafs should win. The Maple Leafs should win their next game as well. And I do put value in teams losing games that they should win because maybe it's not the case, but it seems like at times there can just be a disinterest on one end. And I know that these are all professional athletes, top 1% of athletes in the world, but uh, it's a team that they should beat on paper and probably on the ice too.
Yeah, exactly, and you'd hope so. And again, I'm always the type to kind of try to look at the biggest samples possible, but sometimes a game like this, it's a real snapshot, into their season. Where do they stand right now? Can they beat these, bottom feeder teams? And it shouldn't really be a question, but the fact that we're asking it, part of it maybe is that there's, the Leafs have shown that they struggle sometimes, but part of it also is that they don't necessarily deserve the benefit of the doubt right now just because they've been so kind of wobbly over the last few weeks, honestly.
Yeah, no, they definitely don't deserve the benefit of the doubt, and I'd say that any criticism that they're receiving, it's fair. It's fair to criticize the players for what we're watching out there on the ice.
Yeah, and again, it's tough because a lot of it is, a lot of it comes down to goaltending, but the goalie's part of the team, right?
He's a big part of the team, right? Like that. I think that's the most pressure-filled position in all of sports.
Yeah, I mean, there's other positions that come to mind, QB or
Closer.
exactly, right? There's plenty of, but I mean, no position, at least in hockey for sure, and there's not too many other sports that it really can make or break your team, right? I mean, the Seattle Kraken are a great example of this. I mean, going into the year, a lot of, models had them in the 86, 87, 88 point range, like a fringe playoff team in a relatively weak Pacific division. And they've kind of dealt with this all year where they just haven't been able to get a save. And Grubauer's been statistically the worst goalie by goals saved above expected. And Chris Drieger hasn't really been much better, and it's really cost them in a lot of ways. And they've had their bright spots. I mean, Jared McCann just signed a huge extension with them. He's been a particular bright spot for them, but it's been tough for them, and a lot of that is on the goaltending.
Yeah, I mean Jared Kraken or Jared McCann rather. Jared McCann, Toronto Maple Leafs legend. He had one day in Toronto after being traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins, got drafted by the Seattle Kraken eventually, and he signed a 5-year extension worth $25 million, an annual average value of $5 million. This season, he's put up 21 goals in 50 games played, and in each of his last 2 years, he put up 14 goals. So Jared McCann, I mean, he's a valuable asset, and he's someone who's really emerging as honestly, he's emerging as a star in Seattle.
Absolutely, and he's always kind of been, by the underlying numbers, a bit of a darling. And then last year in Pittsburgh really kind of showed out and really blossomed. Believe he played in the top six. I'm not sure if it was beside Malkin or Crosby, but I mean, was tremendously successful. And then obviously the Maple Leafs dealt the seventh round pick and prospect Philip Hollander, who it wasn't a huge price to pay, but obviously, you trade him, and the hope is that you're able to kind of use him. And then, of course, mere hours later, he's a Seattle Kraken, and he's really been a huge contributor for them. He's kind of coming to his own in a lot of ways, I think, as well as kind of as a centerpiece, right? I mean, he was riding shotgun to two of the best players in the league last year, and this year I think he's really kind of driving his line and has been a really solid contributor. Again, not only by kind of the counting stats, but even his underlying kind of metrics show that he's really been kind of in a lot of ways the real deal. And it's unfortunate that obviously the Leafs missed out on him. But I mean, props to him. He's been really awesome and definitely someone I would think deserving of this contract, I think.
I would say so too. He leads the Seattle Kraken in points. He has uh, one more point than Jordan Eberle. He has 33 points in 50 games, and 6 games less than Jordan Eberle. So that's a pretty good stat for you to really think about. Jared McCann is having an excellent season in Seattle, and he's leading their team in points. So
Yeah,
nice addition for them through the uh, expansion draft this past year.
absolutely. And he $5 million today isn't the same as $5 million, 5-10 years ago, right? I mean, $5 million was paying for a bona fide first line winger. So a lot of people have kind of this perception that $5 million is necessarily that, and I don't think that McCann necessarily is that, but I still think that for $5 million for what he provides, especially because he's a goal scorer, right? And listen, it's a simple matter of fact that not all points are created equal, and he does the one thing that is really tough to do in the NHL, and that is put the puck in the net. So that 25-30 goal range that he looks like he might be capable of, I mean, that to me is right in line with that kind of top tier second line kind of forward. And that $5 million to me seems pretty fair and pretty worthwhile if you're the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, I'd say it's a well-deserved contract. Jared McCann earned that. He earned every penny on that contract, and uh, good for him. Good for him. He really he's had a couple good seasons before this, but this was kind of his breakout year in Seattle per se. And I know tonight's game, Seattle Toronto, we're here previewing it, and I think a interesting way of previewing this, really discussing a lot of different players, a lot of different stats, is to kind of go down the betting road and talk about some props, player props, game props, whatever it may be. And Yori, I'm gonna let you start. I like your props here.
Yeah, so I'll start with my first one. I've got Mitch Marner to score at plus 160. So that first line has, I mean, really been the engine for the Maple Leafs since really kind of they were put together. Obviously, there was that brief period where Bunting was moved down the lineup, but since they've been together, they've been dynamite. And I mean, lately they've been just screaming hot. Last night against the Blue Jackets, they were somewhere in the 70% expected goals range, which for those that are not as, advanced stats savvy, that is, I'd put that in kind of in single game territory. I'd put that in the elite. You're looking for something in the 60% range or 55% to 60% range is like a win. And then anything kind of in the 65 plus range is a really strong night. So that line really has been clicking. And I think there's some value to be found in Marner putting the puck in the net. He's almost underrated as a scorer. He's been in that like 30 goal pace range for a couple of years now, and he still kind of has this kind of reputation that he's a pure playmaker, but he's really kind of added a lot of dimensions to his game, and he's there's a reason he's the second best player on this Toronto Maple Leafs team. I don't know if you want to comment at all on kind of Mitch.
Yeah. Before you head on to your next prop, I just want to discuss Mitch Marner because he has been fantastic for this team, really ever since he got drafted. But as of late, he's been really special. He scored 4 goals in his last 5 games. One of those games he had, he scored a bunch against the Detroit Red Wings, but 4 goals in his last 5 games nonetheless, and he has 22 goals this season. And you were talking about how he's a major contributor to the Maple Leaf success. We've seen the downside of that in the playoffs when he isn't performing, Austin Matthews as well. But this season, in the regular season, when Marner scores a goal, the Maple Leafs are 15-1-0. So I think that really uh, goes to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really, I mean, the Leafs have a core four, right? But the heartbeat really is Matthews and Marner. As they go, so go the Leafs. And when Marner's really feeling it, and he since he really came back from that injury, I mean, it's been nothing but feeling it for him. So, I mean, it's a nice look, especially if you can kind of grab that at the plus 160 range. I think there's probably some value to be had there.
Yeah, he's taken his game to the next level, really, ever since he got back from that injury. And when he fires pucks on net, scores goals, good things are going to happen for the Maple Leafs.
Absolutely. He's got a kind of an underrated shot. I'd say a sneaky decent shot. There was a lot of jokes. I recall it was back in 2017, I think. There was a clip of the Leafs during the Centennial Classic or Centennial. The name of the game escapes me, but the New Year's game against the Red Wings. And there was a clip from that year of Kadri and chatting with a couple of the teammates, and I believe they were talking about Marner, and they were talking about how he had a muffin of a shot, and I don't know if I would call his shot a muffin necessarily anymore. I think he's added some zip to it. He's talked a lot in previous off seasons about it, and it's something that he's clearly worked on, I think.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a laser shot, and I think that I've heard a lot of people discussing how Marner doesn't shoot the puck enough, and that was something that really I feel he's shot the puck a lot more this season. Like when he's playing, he's shooting the puck, getting those pucks on net, and good things happen as a result of it.
Yeah, he's got some zip to his shot, right? Like I said, I mean, I've been a critic of his in the past. I mean, you know the whole contract saga. We don't need to get into that, bad memories. But when it's all said and done, I mean, remarkably so, he's, I think, in a lot of ways been worth that contract, right?
Yeah, he has been in a lot of ways. Like it's a big contract. I've listen. I think that Austin Matthews is worth that money 100%, and Mitch Marner. He is the second best player on the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's another one of those heartbeat players for this team, but I would like to see him carry that over to the playoffs. And the same can be said for Austin Matthews. But I see Mitch Marner in the playoffs. He made more critical mistakes that went against the Maple Leafs. They were detrimental to their success last year. I've been critical of Mitch Marner. I'm giving him the praise that he deserves right now. And I'm hopeful that he can continue this so I can continue praising him. And we'll see how the contract works out down the line, though.
Absolutely. There's still time, but no, I think Marner in a lot of ways has been very much worth his while for all the headaches you'll get, during the playoffs and during the contract negotiations. He's really looked the part of a superstar while playing alongside him of Matthews.
Well, yeah, definitely. He is a superstar in this league. There's no debate about that. Uh, your next prop bet, you have Philip Grubauer under 28.5 saves.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit of we got a little bit of 5D chess going on, if you will, with this one. So I think the thought process here is that if you look at first of all, if you look at the last time the Leafs played the Kraken, the Leafs chased Grubauer, if I recall correctly. Was it or was it Drieger?
I'm
I
not sure who start that game actually. Let me pull that up.
Yeah, well, I think the bigger point is that they were able to chase them, right, and that I think is something to
It was
consider.
it was
And
Grubauer,
then,
yes.
yeah, so they were able to chase Grubauer, and obviously, you're not going to do that every single game. But I think a big part of it is that you're going to put a lot of pucks in the net against the Kraken. That's how it works, right? And another thing that the Kraken do really well is they're a really strong shot suppression team. Uh, they're, I believe, certainly top half, might be top 10 in terms of Corsi against per 60, just in terms of just putting pucks on the net. They prevent those pretty well. They tend to kind of slow the game down when they're playing. So in addition to Grubauer, himself kind of being a bit of a leaky faucet sometimes. The Kraken don't really, the Kraken are pretty solid structurally. So the thought process here is that if you're kind of able to grab Grubauer kind of at that under, just because it might just be literally a case of just, you know, the Leafs maybe put, the Leafs maybe put 30 shots on net, but maybe 4 of those go in, and it's all said and done, right? So there's a couple of different avenues where not only is Grubauer himself just not always the most kind of strong presence in net, it's the defensive structure that the Kraken are able to kind of put together that makes this also pretty enticing, I think.
Yeah, the defensive structure that you're talking about, they block a lot of shots. I believe Adam Larson's in or around the top 10 in shots blocked in the National Hockey League. You have uh, they've actually allowed the second fewest shots on goal per game, so that's a great stat. And they're actually just allowing 28.8 shots on goal per game against them. So you have 28 and a half saves. If the Maple Leafs were to get 28 shots on goal, I'm sure you're anticipating one of those going in. So I really like this Philip Grubauer bet at under 28 and a half saves. I've smashed Peter Mrazek under 27 and a half saves a couple times this season, and I've hit on those.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might be placing a bet on that one later.
Yeah, the group, it's pretty enticing, and I mean, uh, part of it too is that the Leafs are obviously uh, they're obviously an offense first team, right? But I think sometimes Keefe likes to kind of get a little bit too kind of maybe not picky, but he obviously likes to kind of keep his team structured as well, right? And if the Kraken are playing a structured game, it would not shock me if the Leafs tried to, instead of trying to kind of break through that kind of maybe not a trap, but definitely kind of that kind of tight kind of defense, they might just respond with their own kind of tightening of the defense. And again, it might just be a case of just, sometimes you don't get a save and the final score might, rack up, but it doesn't really change the fact that both teams have it in them to slow down their opponent. The Leafs obviously have a much stronger offense than the Kraken do, and I think that probably ends up being the difference maker. But for both of these teams, it wouldn't really shock me to see not as many shots on goal, but still a pretty high final score when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising at all. And we'll get to our score predictions later in the show. I know that we are very different on our score predictions to this game. But your last prop of this game is a compelling one. If you want to tell our viewers a bit more about that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jared McCann to either put the puck in the net or pick up a point. I mean, listen, it's how things tend to work in Leafs land. There's there's really no two ways about it. The Leafs are kind of notorious for these types of things. I mean, McCann scored a goal last time. I mean, they're just the old going is slump busters is a, you may as well call them slump busters, dating way back in terms of if you want to give the team a nickname. But I mean, Jared McCann's been really good this year. I mean, I've been impressed with what I've seen, and I mean he's got that new contract. You'd imagine that's kind of got him fired up, and obviously I'd like to kind of divorce the game from the emotion in terms of trying to focus on the raw numbers and trying to look at the statistics. But even I can acknowledge that you've just cashed in, and you're gonna be coming out with some fire in your belly to just show that you're worth that contract. And I think he'll be pretty involved. There's not a lot of guys on the Kraken that I would call offensive threats. He's one of them. So if they're gonna put up, if they're gonna put the puck in the net, which Campbell's starting, he's been shaky at times. I like McCann to be involved at some point with that.
And you know what? I do too. I have a Jared McCann bet. I'm going to go with Jared McCann anytime goal scorer at plus 300. It just makes so much sense. It's extra fuel to the fire going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that traded for you and then didn't protect you in the expansion draft. So I think that's fueled his fire. He just got a contract extension, and we saw with Morgan Riley, it might not be the case, but it certainly seemed like it was the case that right after he signed that contract extension, he went on fire, and he's been playing stellar ever since. Really took his game to the next level. So I feel as if that maybe a little monkey off the back, confidence booster. Look for Jared McCann to net a goal against his former organization. And I've also got Ilya Mikheyev at over 2.5 shots at plus 220. I love those odds for Ilya Mikheyev. He's got 3 or more shots in each of his last 5 games. And he's a speedy skater. Yesterday we saw him blow by a defender. We've seen that so many times with Mikheyev. He takes shots on the penalty kill, and honestly, I think that's kind of a gimme bet.
Yeah, Mikheyev is I mean, he's sometimes a bit of a one-trick pony. You know, he's got those wheels, but those wheels, they work. Mikheyev's been a really kind of surprise contributor for the Leafs, pending UFA. So we'll see what their plans long term are for him. But he, to this point, has been really kind of a pleasant surprise after a disappointing year last year. He's putting the puck in the net this time, which last year he just wasn't doing. I think per 82, he's pacing for almost 30 goals, and he's obviously not going to play 82 games, given that he missed the bulk of the year with his injury. But he's been a solid contributor.
He has been a solid contributor to this team, and really ever since he got back from that injury, he's been really excellent for this Maple Leafs team. He's a great role player. I love his role on the penalty kill. It's really fun to watch him play on the penalty kill, and he's just such a speedy skater. Uh, my last prop bet, I've from the Seattle Kraken, Mark Giordano over 1.5 shots. That seems like a low value bet there. Just 2 shots on goal that is needed to get this prop. And I know it's from a defenseman, Mark Giordano, but he's hit this in 10 of his last 12 games. Going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs, I expect there to be some shots from the point. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Mark Giordano hit over 2.5 shots tonight.
Yeah,
Or
no,
over
I
one and a
like
half.
this one.
1.5,
Yeah,
sorry.
I like this one too. The Leafs are really good at defending the slot, so the Kraken are going to be working from the outside a lot. And I don't obviously have the numbers in front of me, but I recall seeing something a number of weeks ago. It would have been, but regardless, from J Fresh Hockey on Twitter, the Kraken are one of the most shot heavy defense shots from their defenseman heavy teams in the league. And it makes sense, right? I mean, you look at how much money they invested in their defense during the offseason. They brought in Alexiak, they brought in Larson, they brought in Giordano. They brought in a lot of guys that really were defense first, right? So it does not kind of shock me that they would be among those leaders. And I think that in a lot of respects, especially because I think Giordano gets some power play time for them as well. Especially, and the Leafs don't always play in the most chippy of games in terms of penalties called. They're among the league's lowest in penalties taken and penalties power play opportunities. But I would suspect that is a really good value bet just based on how the Kraken play and how the Leafs tend to kind of play as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got some great stats there. I'm not sure if you have watched very many Kraken games this year. I've seen a few. I've caught a few. It's fun to watch a new team just trying to get their footing in the National Hockey League. And I have noticed a lot of shots from the point from Giordano, Adam Larson. They're just firing it from back there. And this is a team that built from the blue line up. They built from their back end up. Like they're very solid defensively. Jared McCann's their top goal scorer, but I mean, on most teams, he wouldn't be the top goal scorer, and that's not to take away from what he's done this season because he's been excellent for them. But that's just the point. There is that they are a defense first team.
Yeah, and even back to his Calgary days, right? Not that those were that long ago, but Giordano has always been that offensive first in terms of just not afraid to whale it, right? He's had some high scoring seasons. He won the Norris that one year. he's got it in him to put the puck on net, and that's not to say that he's going to score necessarily tonight, but I definitely like him to kind of let a few rip from the blue line. It seems pretty. It seems like there's enough kind of factors involved there that he's going to be involved in their offense one way or another. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Definitely. And we're going to get into our score predictions. So, everybody in the comment section, if you want to drop your score predictions for this game, I'll post some of them up here. And if you haven't already, please make sure you smash the like button, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. If you're new to the channel, stay tuned for more content. You're coming your way from Maple Leafs Media. Trade deadlines coming up really soon. There's going to be a lot of trade talk videos coming out, post game shows, pre game shows, a lot of content coming out. And also, if you haven't already, please check out Jori's Twitter. His
Jory,
Twitter hand.
it's all good.
Jori, sorry,
It's all good.
Jori's Twitter and his Twitter handle right there. I've got my Twitter handle here as well. We're both sports journalists getting into the industry, so we'd appreciate the support that you give us there and on here. And Jori, would you like to give your score prediction for tonight's game?
I would love nothing more than to do so. So for me, I don't know if you want to throw it up, but I've got the Leafs taking this one 5-3. I think this is, you can tie this one in a little bit with the kind of Grubauer over under with the saves, but the Leafs have been putting the puck in the net a lot, and the Kraken have been allowing a lot of goals, and the Leafs have been allowing a lot of goals, and the Kraken have not been scoring as much as the Leafs. So I think this one will be a lot like the last few Leafs games. You're going to see a lot of goals. You're going to see a lot of goals that you would ideally like to be saved, but I think that the Leafs should ultimately take this one, ideally in a pretty comfortable 5-3 victory.
And that's interesting. You make some great points there. I've got a very different score prediction. I've got a low scoring game, 3-1 Seattle Kraken, and neither team has really been in very many low scoring games as of late. So that's not an argument that I can go to. But what I can go to is the fact that I mentioned earlier the Seattle Kraken allow the second fewest shots on goal per game. I think that they're going to be blocking a lot of shots. Maple Leafs will have a tough time getting shots through traffic in this game. And it's going to be interesting to see how they try to overcome that obstacle, that Kraken per se, that monster. And so it will be interesting to watch this game. I'm excited for it. Two very different score predictions. So you can come back here after the game and let us know how we did with the score predictions. But we'll see. Anyone in the comment section got theirs? James says Leafs for Kraken 2. Interesting. Chris Patterson says Campbell and net. Going
Chris,
for
I love your optimism, Chris. You know what? I love that optimism, and I don't know if I've got it in me quite yet to echo what you've got, but I mean, I like where your head's at.
He's got the confidence in Jack Campbell, and you know what? Good for him. Good on him. And thank you everybody for watching this show. Jori, thank you so much for coming on here talking about the Seattle Kraken Toronto Maple Leafs game we're about to witness at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You want to give your closing words for the viewers here?
Well, I mean, hopefully, I think the Leafs should probably put this one, behind. They should be able to put 2 points in the bag, and ideally it's a nice clean victory. We haven't seen a lot of those lately, so I guess we'll see. But I mean, just beyond that, I just want to say thanks for having me on. Absolute pleasure, and looking forward to watching this one and hopefully seeing a good performance from the Maple Leafs tonight.
Yeah, hopefully. That's all you can really do is hope for it and hope for the best. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you everyone for spending the last 45 minutes. Chris says, are you coming on after the game tonight? You know what? Why not? Sure, I'll do a post-game show tonight too. But yeah, thank you, Jori. Thank you everyone for watching. And until next time, I'm Jake Farco.
Take care. I'm Jori.